Everybody, welcome. We are going to get started at 3 o'clock and we might have a few more folks joining us. Welcome to our info session for the Earth Institute's pre-college programs. My name is Cassie and I work at the Earth Institute. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Earth Institute, our core mission is to foster a greater understanding of the science behind sustainability and the climate crisis and what we as citizens can do. The Earth Institute is actually made up of about more than 20 or so research centers and several hundred people across Columbia University who collaborate across many different disciplines and schools. So we're really excited to be offering our non-degree programs for the very first time. Under non-degree programs, we'll have pre-college programs as well as professional learning programs. And today you are going to hear from the instructors who are going to be offering pre-college programs this fall, both in October and November. Before we get started and I turn it over to them, I wanted to actually bring up an exciting kind of news and side note, and it's that the Earth Institute at Columbia is actually moving forward with efforts to establish the Columbia Climate School, which is extremely exciting because it's going to be the first new school in 25 years at the university and the first climate school of its kind. The school is going to be really unique in its structure, and we're going to be offering both formal degree programs as well as non-degree programs, such as our pre-college workshops. Just a quick overview about the non-degree programs for you to, I think some of you might have already seen our website, but just to go over a couple of key points. These are all going to be online for this academic year, and everything will be in small group sessions so that you get great individual attention from all of your instructors. And because these are non-degree programs, we won't be offering transcripts for the workshops, but each of the instructors, as they'll tell you, will be doing things like assigning readings, and there might be small tasks and assignments and final products and that sort of those sorts of things. You'll get to learn from Columbia faculty and staff and experts who are who are really experts in their fields. And this is a really exciting part of our pre-college offerings. You get to learn science and deal with topics and learn about topics and solutions, and extend your learning beyond the classroom. And you'll also be able to participate along with peers. And everyone who does participate will receive a certificate of participation from the Earth Institute that indicates the workshop that you've completed, as well as a number of hours in those workshops, which are 15 hours for all of our pre-college workshops. Because this is our first offering, we're excited to offer a special introductory rate, and we'll also have reduced rates available for those who are affiliated with Columbia, as well as those who attend Title I schools for the pre-college programs. So if you have any questions about those reduced rates, the information is on our website. Feel free to also send us an email about it. Our email is learn@ei.columbia.edu. We're going to be recording everything, and we'll be sure to send you a recording of the info session after this is done. And the last thing you're going to hear from me for now is that we're going to be using the Q&A box, and we'll be monitoring that throughout the presentations. And if you do have any questions or concerns, please feel free to just put that right in the Q&A box. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Joán Lopez and Beth Yoshida, and the two of them are going to talk to you about their workshop, Let the Youth Lead. So Joán, you can take it away.
Okay, I was muted. So hello everyone, and hello to my co-panelists. Thank you, Cassie, for the introduction. So our workshop, our course is called Let the Youth Lead, as Cassie mentioned. And we draw from the work in the construction of this workshop, we draw from the work that we have been advancing at the Advanced Consortium on Cooperation, Conflict and Complexity at Columbia University. It's one of those centers that Cassie mentioned, where we advance the science of peace building and conflict transformation through the lens to a multiplicity of lenses, but mostly drawing from the social sciences in relationship to natural science and mathematics. So I will now pass it along to Professor Fisher Yoshida to give you some background information.
Great. So thank you and welcome everybody. I just wanted to set the context a little bit about why we're doing the work that we're doing. And we realize that youth are the leadership of now in the world going forward. And so we wanted to really join in with like the UN, for example, which has a resolution 2250 on youth, peace and security, and to follow along that track and trend to see that youth are not just victims and perpetrators of violence, but they're actually creators of peaceful solutions to addressing the violence. And so one of the things that we did was think, well, what can we offer to youth to share the information that we have, the practices and research that we base our work on? And so we had developed a leadership certificate that we ran and are still running. And what we're offering here to you is a modified version of what that is, because that's a much longer, more intense process. But we'll go over that in a little bit. But it's really about being able to teach some of the practices that we know and support your initiatives in being able to implement successful projects that are sustainable. So we know that all of you are at different stages in your own leadership development, and we think that leadership development is life work that you continue to develop as you go along. So it's not that you can just check the box and say, okay, I've developed as a leader, because circumstances are always changing. And one of the great things to do is to develop self-awareness and be aware of who you are and what you bring to your leadership and be able to adapt to the changing needs of the people that you're serving. The other thing is that we have been testing out a lot of what we've been doing with a lot of youth leaders, mostly in the city of Medellin, Colombia, and other places. And when we had the leadership certificate program in New York, I guess a year ago, or a little over a year ago, then we had leaders from around the world representing 8 different countries. And so one of the things we noticed is that while specific circumstances may differ, there are still certain threads of commonality that go across youth being leaders any place in the world, and that there's a way of learning from each other and building on each other's practices, as well as building a support network for the work that you're doing. So you can call on each other. And then we were thinking of eventually having, when we can all be back in person, having conferences and so on, and maybe even doing some virtually to bring youth leaders together around the world. So the next slide.
So let's look more at the actual content and the objective in general of the course, the workshop. And this looks to invite current and future youth leaders, as Beth was saying, to enhance their existing practices, the enthusiasm and the knowledge in order to support and further develop their roles or your roles as change agents in local and global community efforts. So we have divided the workshop with these categories in order to achieve that general objective. And the first one has to do with acknowledging, conceiving, becoming conscious of self as an instrument of change. So the premise here is that we live in integral worlds, in integral systems, and that we participate in them. And thus, if we acknowledge our participation, our agency in these systems, then we can become better agents of or instruments of change. The other categories is the systems thinking approach that has to do also drawing from this past premise that we live in complex and very deeply connected systems. And in order to, for the lack of a better expression, resolve or transform a specific social issue, we need to address other issues that work in relationship with this issue that we are striving to transform. So we have this systems thinking approach into the workshop. The third one has to do with best practices in the field. So this draws from our own experience in doing fieldwork research with practitioners, with youth leaders in different parts of the world, having learned their tools, their technologies, their notions as to how to become better leaders on the one hand, and also better community members on the other, and sharing this with the participants of the workshop. And with this, there is this idea of a community of practice where we can together share practices and knowledge in general. And lastly, we are developing this idea that melts, as it were, theory and practice. So the concrete activities, practices of social transformation, leadership that take place in the ground, enter into conversation with the theoretical frameworks that in academia we have constructed. And with this, we believe that there is a better space to advance youth leadership in social transformation.
So we've divided the workshop into 4 broad modules, and a lot of these are based on the premise that we need to walk the talk. We need to model the skills, the concepts, the approach, the maturity, the sophistication, the professionalism that we expect from others. And so in order to do that, we really focus a lot on psychosocial development. And that is dealing a lot with emotions, because a lot of times your reaction to things speaks way louder than any words you might say. So because the kinds of issues that you might be addressing are so complex and complicated and unpredictable, and things emerge, and usually things don't always go according to plan. So if you're a very planful person, you have to be able to develop what we call resilience in situations. You need to continue to learn about yourself. So as Joán was saying, self as instrument of change is just by entering into a system, you're already having an effect of some sort on that system. Just by asking a question, you're already having an effect, because you're prompting people to think about things they may not have thought about before. So psychosocial development is important. And again, it's part of that life work process, because you'll never be in the same situation exactly the same way twice. So you're constantly learning and taking in new information, new data, and then processing that and developing a reflective process in turn. Communication is very important. And here we have a lot of cultural implications as well, because there's the spoken word, the words that are not spoken, there are the nonverbal kinds of communication that we do. And so we have to figure out, who am I and what am I bringing to this interaction? Because my relationship is built on the quality of the communication I have with others. So I need to continuously improve and hone my communication skills so that the message I'm trying to convey really lands in the person the way I want it to be communicated. Project design we thought was very important as well, because one of the concerns that we've seen around the world is that a lot of youth have great passion, and not only youth, people have great passion and they want to make something happen, but how do you turn that initiative into a long-term project and not just an event or a series of events? Where is the design in the project so that it can continue on, starting from the original inception of the idea to setting the goals and understanding what are the activities that need to take place to achieve those goals? How do you measure that the goals have been achieved, and so on? And then the other part is sustainability. You don't want to go in, make some changes and pull out and everything collapses on itself. What needs to be put into place so that either you're building capacity in others, that you're institutionalizing or systematizing the changes that you've made. So the system itself can continue on and the people are capable to continue on with the initiatives that you have, so you don't in turn make things worse than they were when you started. So these 4 modules address the challenges and the focus that Joán mentioned. And now Joán will just talk a little bit about what the program itself will look like.
So as students, participants experience and complete the program, there are these 3 goals that we want to achieve. The first one has to do with precisely understanding the systemic approaches to social and conflict transformation and of basic conflict resolution skills. So this has to do mostly with tools around systems thinking and conflict transformation and conflict resolution. Another element here is to develop the consciousness, the awareness of the agency of ourselves, and also to learn to communicate to relevant stakeholders. And this is connected with the former element that has to do with being able to read the context in its totality. So being able to identify all of the relevant stakeholders and construct relationships with them. And lastly, there is the frame and setup component, which has to do with designing a project or building from a project that is already being executed or thought about by you, the participant, and then pitching it to the course, to the participants in general for collective feedback. So these are the 3 general objectives that we would like to achieve throughout the course of the workshop.
That concludes our presentation, and I'm not sure if there's an opportunity for Q&A or if we move on to the next presentation.
Nope, there is an opportunity for Q&A. So for those of you who are watching, if you'd like to ask any questions of our presenters, Beth or Joán, feel free to use actually either the chat or the Q&A box. Both are working and at your fingertips. I might just start with a question. Since you two have done a version of this before for a longer program, what are some of the issues or projects that former youth had decided to take on? I'm curious to hear about the range of those issues and where those projects ended up.
So I'll mention a little bit about one project that took place in Togo, and that was mostly related to alternative forms of energy. And so one of the challenges that the person had was in being able to get the resources that he needed and access, because he had a mobile truck and he drove that around to different villages to engage youth in different kinds of experiments, kind of like a science lab in his truck. So being able to have accessible roads to get to where he needed, being able to have energy generated, so to be able to run some of the things that he had, and the money to cover the cost of the transportation and running of the lab were some of the challenges. But he comes from an engineering background and he was putting that to use. And I thought it was a great project and super successful. And when he went, and he had a couple of different initiatives with colleagues of his that he spoke about. So whatever learning he was gaining from the certificate, he was taking back as well to share with his colleagues and to continue to improve on what he was doing. So Joán, do you want to talk about another project that somebody had?
Yes, I can. So another very interesting project that came out was being executed in northern France, and it deals with refugees from North Africa. And the participant, what she wants to accomplish is to represent the experiences of refugees in the north of France, and their experiences also as immigrants in the north of France, through artistic representations, mostly murals. So she is working with collectives of young people that are sons and daughters of refugees in order to encapsulate the experiences of these youth as refugees and migrants in the north of France, dealing, of course, with issues of race, class, national identities.
So one of the things we have found in our own work as well is that use of alternative means of communication, just really broadening the whole range of how people express themselves and communicate, and how transformative and healing that can be is amazing. So we've had lots of people do work through the arts, a variety of arts, could be music, visual arts, and so on. People who've done things like juggling and being clowns, and the whole art of how does that mean to communicate, have been really effective. And actually what I've learned over the years is that graffiti, which looks like just some wild painting in the open, is not really that wild and open. I mean, there are certain types of bombing and stuff that they call that happens, but there's actually a very structured approach, a methodology to learning about self-expression and how you tell your story through visual arts, and that there are stages of development that youth go through in being able to become more expert graffiti artists. So we have a question here that says, do you need a specific project to take the course? And I would say not already formed, but it would be good to have an idea about something you might think about doing. So whatever it is that you're interested in and you're passionate about, and you think, well, maybe I'd like to work on this particular project. I don't know. I don't have anybody to work with. I haven't worked out the solutions or anything about it yet. Bring that idea with you, so that as you're learning the skills in the workshop and the different concepts, you can apply it to the idea that you have, that you want to shape and form. So people can be at any stage of development in terms of their project ideas.
And it can be also thought about in terms of issues, perhaps not yet a project itself, but some issues that you might be interested in addressing or tackling.
So in more recent times, people are grappling with questions such as, do you believe in wearing a mask or not during COVID? And if you do believe in wearing a mask and you're in a place where somebody's not wearing a mask, what do you do? Do you say something? Do you not say something? If you say something, what are the risks? And if you do say something, what might be a way you can say it that it will be received well? And so this is a controversy. So I know there are some people working on the issue of communication and maybe political orientation or orientation to belief or not in science and your relationship to COVID and so on. And so that could be a project. How do you communicate messages that are important to the general public? That's a project, and that could be an issue as well. And then maybe it's how do you, and this is something else we've noticed in the past, how do you get buy-in from stakeholders when you have an idea? And we've talked about different things we've done in Colombia, such as social labs, and that you involve different people in the systems in the room. So even if you have an issue, as Joán said, that you want to address, and it's not a formally baked idea, bring the issue, bring your concerns, and we can brainstorm together ways of shaping it into something that might be able to move forward. And as they say, gain legs so that it can actually stand on its own.
That's great. Thank you both. If there are additional questions, feel free to type away. I might jump in here. You know, I think one of the sort of strengths of being able to take a sort of small workshop with peers and individuals who you may otherwise not sort of interact with in your daily lives. I'm curious if you two could comment perhaps on, you know, since you've done this before, have the youth who have participated in the past program stayed in touch with each other, stayed in touch with you, building that network and sort of the importance of building that network with their peers as well as stakeholders.
Yes, indeed. So the cohort that we had last year is very much in touch. And there is always collaboration among them, collaboration of resources such as information about open calls for proposals, collaboration on ideas. So we actually have a WhatsApp chat, and it's a way of being connected. And sometimes I see that there is an idea being cooked, quote unquote, and it's exposed there, and people, the participants now that are friends, really chip in and think about this project at hand. So there is that relationship, a very human, I think, and organic relationship that grew up out of the first cohort.
Yeah, and it's something that you can't necessarily predict, but there's something about the synergy that happens, especially when you go through your own psycho-emotional learning. And the thing that's so beautiful about this particular cohort of youth, which we see in lots of different places with different cohorts, is that they've connected in such a strong, empathic way that they come to the other group to celebrate their successes. So when anybody has good news to share, they share it with the group, and everybody celebrates them in a very sincere, genuine way. And it's just so rewarding and enriching to see, because they want everybody to share in their success, because they feel as though the rest of the group is part of their success and part of their story. And so it's really developed in such a beautiful, heartwarming way. It really is very nice. And I'm sure that will continue to happen.
And just to add something quick to this, so there is this sharing, this collaboration among the group, which also extends to other stakeholders. So there is a participant that is building a network of youth leaders in Southeast Asia. And we happen to have been working also with a person in Colombia that is developing a network of youth leaders in the Iberian Peninsula and Latin America. And thus we connected them to share tools, to share names, to share experiences. So then there is a greater community of practice, community of knowledge, etc., that grows out of this.
Okay, great. If anybody else has any additional questions for Joán or Beth, definitely type it in the chat or the Q&A box. So their workshop is called Let the Youth Lead, and it will start in October, specifically October 6th. They're going to be offering this on Tuesdays and Thursdays virtually, starting October 6th and wrapping up on October 29th. If you have any questions for either Joán or Beth or myself, oh, I see one question here. Okay, so what is the time commitment? So so as I mentioned, it's so each of the sessions are 2.5 hours. So October 6th is the start date. So, and then we'll do this particular workshop is Tuesdays and Thursdays from 2 to 4:30. There is 1 week when there are no sessions and participants are going to be working on their independent projects. And I don't know, Beth and Joán, if you want to add anything about the time commitment, if you can sort of foresee additional sort of tasks that participants might be asked to do, readings and that sort of thing.
Yeah, so in addition to the actual face-to-face time on Zoom, there are some readings and some activities we'll have you do, but nothing too time consuming, and we hope it's more enjoyable than not. And it's that week in between where you spend any amount of time you want to develop your idea. So it's probably like 5 to 8 hours a week, including the Zoom sessions.
And there is a comment here that says high school ends at 2:40. And I think we can add that within those hours that we are committing virtually, there are some asynchronous exercises. So it doesn't mean that we have to be in front of the computer for this amount of time necessarily.
And I will mention that all of these are, of course, all of the workshops and sessions will be recorded, and that everyone who would be registered for it will have access to those recordings both during the workshop and then also basically forever afterwards. So you are able to have access to that. So yeah, let's see here. We have a couple more Q&A. How many groups of students do you have? I'm not sure if this is, so I'm not sure what this is trying to get at, but I'll comment on this. So right now, because this is our first time offering this, we are offering this workshop once this fall. So it'll just be from October 6th until the end of October I think it's October 29th. And all the participants registered for the workshop would be expected to attend together collectively. We would cap the workshop to ensure that this is a small enough group. And we are unsure about sort of spring offerings. So if this is something that you are interested in taking or participating in, I definitely encourage you to register for these particular sessions. Hopefully that was the, right. So okay, great. So maximum number, we're thinking about capping at 20 at this point. That may end up changing. We have the rates available on the site. So there's a special intro offer of, and that is, it is $11.99, so $1,199. And we also have reduced rates available for, like I said, if you're Columbia staff, or if you're affiliated with Columbia, if you're a student, I encourage you to look at the rates, reduced rate options that are available on the website, as well as there's rates for Title I schools as well. And if you have any questions about those rates, please email us. It's learn@ei.columbia.edu. And I think we are, seems like all the questions for now. And again, if you have these questions, we'll continue to keep an eye on the Q&A box. Joán and Beth, is there anything else you would like to add?
Only that we look forward to working with you.
Okay.
Yeah, I echo that.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much to you both. And we will bring on Nick Frearson, who is the other instructor for the other pre-college workshop that we will be offering. We are going to be, Nick's workshop is called Out of Thin Air, and it's actually going to be a maker workshop. And Nick is going to tell us about his offering, and then we'll get into, and we'll do a similar setup where we'll open it up for questions after he's done. So Nick, if you want to take it away. Sorry, I think you're on mute. Yeah, there you go.
Oh, thank you, Cassie. Yeah, that's worked just fine. And yeah, I would just share my screen. Hold on 1 second. There we go. Can you all see that?
Yep.
Excellent.
Great.
Thank you very much. Well, hello, everyone. And thank you, Beth and Joán, for sharing that fascinating course on developing future world leaders. I got to listen in on that. It sounds really interesting. And thanks, Cassie, for enabling us to be here today. So my name is Nick Frearson. I'm here today to talk about a new course that atmospheric scientist Dr. Rogine Kamain and myself, both from the Earth Institute and Columbia University, are offering this fall. It's called Out of Thin Air. And on this course, you'll discover, study and analyze carbon dioxide levels on the street, in your home, in your classroom, even in your office, by building a small portable carbon dioxide monitor yourselves. We'll develop this together throughout the course. And don't worry, you don't need to be an electronic whiz kid to do this course. The components, the component list will be available, and it's quite simple. And we will help you every step of the way to develop your very own carbon dioxide monitor. So who am I? Well, I'm actually the guy in the tent in the picture that you're looking at. And I'm a senior engineer, researcher, and explorer at Lamont Observatory within the Earth Institute at Columbia University in New York. And I develop sensors, I develop sensor systems, basically to to study our changing planet. And I've taken them all over the world, from the Arctic to Antarctica and many places in between. As you see on the pictures, these are just some of the places that I go to, and some of the sensors that we develop. We get to look at study the properties of the atmosphere. We study the oceans. We study ice sheets. It's absolutely fascinating, and I hope you can join us on a real fun journey of discovery as we develop our own little sensors and look at them, study the world, and see the world with new eyes. I will be running the course along with my colleague, Dr. Rosine Kamain. Dr. Rosine Kamain is an assistant professor in the Department of the Earth and Environmental Sciences at Columbia University. She divides her time between conducting her research in atmospheric science, particularly studying the sources and effects of pollution in urban environments, something which affects us all. When she's not doing that, she's lectures at the university, at the undergraduate, graduate, and doctoral student level. And between us, we have many years of experience in the field of pollution analysis and sensor development. So we would like to pass that on to you, and hope you enjoy this sort of subject as much as we do. As many of you all know, carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas, which, when released into the atmosphere, helps keep heat into the planet and has the effect of warming it up. But it's also a great indicator of some other things. One of those being local pollution level. Now, you may not know this, but urban areas only comprise about 3% of Earth's land area, but account for about 70% of global fossil fuel derived CO2 emissions. Many cities have pledged to, as a result, many cities have pledged to reduce their carbon emissions by up to 80% of the 2005 levels by 2050. And that's a really good thing to aim at. Cities currently estimate their carbon emissions using inventory-based methodologies. Now, what on earth does that mean? Well, if you know how many people travel to work, say, by car every day in a particular place, then you can estimate how much pollution will be generated without actually measuring it. Now, that's a kind of second-hand way of doing that. I think it's fairly good, but it misses hotspots, and it misses certain key changes in very short time frames during the day in pollution levels. And so few cities actually measure their carbon emissions directly. Now, quantifying CO2 emissions would now provide, like a baseline against which we can assess the effectiveness of policies that cities implement. And, there's resolutions in place, which you may have heard of, to control and reduce carbon emissions across the planet. And these come down to, sort of city-wide implementations as well. And you will learn all about those things from Dr. Kamain and her colleagues. For instance, did you know that the New York metro area, the most populous urban area in the US, with upward of 20 million people living in close proximity, at least they were till some of them moved out recently, is the largest urban source of anthropogenic CO2 in the US, and the third largest megacity source globally. And that New York State has mandated a carbon-free electricity system by 2040. That's quite a task, and something fantastic to aim at. So, for ourselves, and for, say, you on this course, you live in a city and measure the level of carbon dioxide, say, at the corner of your street. You'll find that it is higher right where the vehicles stop at the junction. And if you move only a few feet away, maybe 10 feet away, it's amazing. And I mean, unless you measure it, you don't get to see these fine scale changes that happen in any environment, and particularly in urban environments. The same thing happens with many other pollutants, such as black carbon, which many vehicles emit and are definitely not good things to breathe in. So these are all really good things to know about. And we can kind of study them by understanding carbon dioxide levels in the areas where they're all prevalent. Indoors, the level of carbon dioxide can be an indicator of the level of airflow in a room. Now, when we breathe out, we breathe out carbon dioxide amongst other things. And if the room we're in is poorly ventilated, then the level of carbon dioxide will start to go up. And in fact, if you look at the little graph that's on the slide that you're looking at, Dr. Kamain actually took that this morning in the lab. And so it shows a time frame along the bottom and level of carbon dioxide up the side. And the numbers are relevant to the gas, and they're almost, that flat line along the first part of the graph shows that the carbon dioxide levels in the office or in the lab were actually at around about background levels. And then as soon as Dr. Kamain went into the lab and actually went over to the instrument, which is actually been measuring the carbon dioxide levels and is very similar to the one we will build on this course, she kind of leant over the machine, and so she breathed on it. The carbon dioxide levels shot up in the room. And then as she went about doing her work in the lab, the levels sort of evened out a bit, but remained generally higher. So we realized, you could tell very quickly that someone was in the room, and you could also tell that the air was not being exchanged very quickly in the room. That is something that's really important today. As we return to school or we go to the office, I don't know about you, but I even wonder how good the air quality is in the room that I'm sitting in right now. How can we measure it? Well, we have a carbon dioxide monitor, one we can build together. So how will this course work? Change the slide. There we go. So first of all, you don't need to be a specialist electronics person who have particular skills in this area or computing skills to complete this course. We will help you all the way to develop your carbon dioxide monitor. And a list of components will be provided with the course notes. A sensor will be included as part of the materials. There will be 5 classes, each about 3 hours long over the course of 2 weeks in early November. And each class will have the course materials describing the aims and objectives for that class. We will work together through the class to learn from the experts, learn from Dr. Kamain, learn from her colleagues who will come on to do the course with us and teach you about observational atmospheric science and the parameters around controlling things like carbon dioxide in our atmosphere. You'll also learn how to build and program a carbon dioxide monitor using not a simple Arduino-based microcontroller and a programming language called C++. And again, don't worry, all the programs you'll need to run your monitor will actually be available to download. I would like to try and get you to program them yourselves, and that's great if you can. But obviously, we can download the software to do this if that's not something that's your thing. And you'll also learn how to calibrate the CO2 monitor. So for any sensor in science, calibration of the monitors, of the sensors, in this case, the CO2 sensors, is incredibly important because without calibration, we don't really know what the sensor is telling us. We maybe see some trends, but we don't know how exact the results are and really how real they are. Another thing that we will do is learn how to georeference data that we collect, okay? Now this is super important because without knowing where the data was collected, the data actually is somewhat useless scientifically. But we can solve this problem. We can add a small GPS receiver to the system and log the GPS data. Now GPS data will tell us about the time that we took the sample of the data, and it'll tell us the place because it'll give us a latitude and longitude. So we will be able to show you how to create files called KML files from that GPS data, which we can download straight into Google Earth. So you can open Google Earth, you can drop the KML file in, and it'll show you where you collected your data on the planet, anywhere on the planet, which is just fantastic and staggering actually these days. And so let's say you take when you built your CO2 monitor, you take it for a walk or you go out in the car with it, it's portable. Then when you download the KML file into Google Earth, you'll be able to see exactly where you went. And so you tie that to the data that you collect, and you'll be able to see what the levels of the data were when you collected them. So if you think about it, if you go and stand on that street corner and see higher levels of carbon dioxide, you'll know that you were there because you'll see it on the Google Earth map. So what else are we going to do? Well, we're going to learn how you are going to learn, we're all together going to learn how to analyze and interpret the data that you collect with the help of Rosine and her colleagues. So, this is the most important thing. We're going to build a tool, we're going to collect some data, and then she's going to show us how to analyze it. And it's so important to understand, where pollution comes from, its effects on our health, how we can reduce emissions. So these are all things that we will go through on the course. You'll also learn how to make plots from those measurements using a program called R. And one of these plots on screen. And it's very simple, and R is freely available on the internet. You can download it, and we'll show you how to work with R to produce these wonderful plots. This one here, the red line, shows carbon dioxide levels, and again across a period of 24 hours. And somewhere around noon, it looks like wherever this sensor was, and it doesn't tell us that on this plot. You can see how important that actually is. Somebody, let's say, came into the room that the sensor was in and stayed there for a while and then left probably around 5 o'clock in the evening. So you can just imagine that with going back to the classrooms, wondering whether the airflow is good enough to take away, any viruses that might be around. By studying the carbon dioxide levels and monitoring them in the room, we're probably going to be able to tell things like that. So that's really important. So in summary, we're going to learn about atmospheric science by measuring and monitoring carbon dioxide is so important. What some of the resolutions are, which are in place to control and reduce carbon emissions, and the targets that governments and states and cities across our planet are aiming at to help reduce those emissions. And we will design and build a microcontroller-based carbon dioxide monitoring system and learn how to program it in C++ and learn how to analyze and display the data that you collect, with your own carbon dioxide monitoring system. So that's basically the course and how we will go about it. And so if anyone has any kind of questions or anything, then I'm very happy to answer them.
Great, thank you, Nick. So if there are questions, please feel free to type it in the Q&A box and we will take a look. Nick, you've also done this a little bit before, not in a sort of workshop sort of setting. You've worked with high school students before, and you've also worked on sensors with them before. Can you talk a little bit about perhaps some of the, you've hinted at this a little bit, but the skills that students will acquire through the process of, building sensors, understanding, why it's super important to be able to quantify the emissions. So if you could comment on the types of skills and things that, yeah, that would be really helpful.
Absolutely, Cassie. Yeah. Yeah, no, it was great working. Last summer, we did a sort of a kind of a workshop with high school students from the New York area and in the Bronx particularly. And the thing that I always start off with when working with students is to help them develop their, if you like, their thinking process for designing something in the first place. So we don't just go in and say, here's a design, start to build it, let's see what it does. We actually talk about, the science first, that's how this course will work. And what are the things we're trying to measure? And what are the things we're trying to get out of it? And then we'll go, well, how do we do this? What do we do? Do we sort of just stick our fingers in the air and sort of try and work it out? Or, what are we going to do? And so we can use, in this case, some kind of CO2 sensor. So what are they? What do they even do? How do they work? And we go through all this process. And so the kids learn how to be constructive about how they develop something. And it's constructive thinking. And I have to say that the kids that we worked with last year just loved the course, and we got some great feedback from them saying that's exactly what they did, what they felt they developed. They felt so much more confident to be able to tackle problems of any nature, actually, not even related to anything we're doing. It's just like they suddenly saw problems as something that you kind of deconstruct and look at all the little parts of them and put them into boxes and then build it back up about how you'll solve that particular problem. And that was something, I wasn't really initially aiming at, but I do it myself, I think, naturally. And that's something that I think we would like to bring out in this course, as well as just the main, the task of understanding CO2 levels, understanding policy, building something really interesting and being able to measure it and think about it yourselves.
Great. Great. Thank you. And in terms of the sensors themselves, I know that I think you said, they can be used indoors or outdoors. I'm curious, how are they weatherproof? Can you have it outdoors, outside a window in New York City? What if it snows? What if it rains? How sturdy are the sensors that the
Hey.
participants are going to build?
So Cassie, we're doing it now. We're doing that design process.
Right, perfect.
I like this.
Yeah.
No, and it's a great question. Yeah, I mean, if you can spend as much money as you like on these things, so you can make a really expensive thing, and it's probably very good. But you can also do these things that how we want to do them right now, so that everyone gets a chance to try and build them. And so literally like a plastic lunchbox is a great thing for putting electronics in with a little battery in it and stuff like that. And it'll sit outside in the rain and it won't let the rain in, and it'll keep the snow out, as you were asking about. And so, this is part of that process. We'll itemize those things and say, hey, if you buy this, then it's big enough to put everything into, and it's very simple to use. It's a process that, and if somebody has a different idea, I'm totally willing to go with it, because if they come up with this fantastic idea about how you put the sensors into some other type of enclosure, and they've got one at home, it's like, well, let's do it. That'd be great.
Okay. Excellent. Okay, I've answered a couple of questions in the chat box. So Nick, is there anything else that you think the audience should know about the sensors or about the workshop or about yourself that you'd like to add?
I could certainly talk about the work that I do all day, but in terms of this course, now I did mention it, but I guess I'll say it again, that the CO2 sensor itself, I think we're going to provide that, aren't we? Because that's something where I want to buy specific ones so we know their properties, because there's lots of things out there and some of them are good and some of them are bad. And then, it doesn't mean they're expensive, it just means we'd like to get the right one. So we'll provide that, but we'll provide a list of the components. It's an Arduino Uno little kit that I think we're going to suggest everybody gets. There's a programming language to do with Arduinos that you download, a programming environment, and it's free off the internet. You download it and work in that on your, so we need a laptop and a USB cable basically, and you can plug into the microcontroller, the Arduino board, and that's how we start talking. Then we start talking to it, as it were, in the programming language and going from there. So I think initially there'll be a lot of discussion about how we do all that and how we even connect these things up. And once we're running with that, it makes life is much easier. You don't need a soldering iron. You don't need to have to do anything like that. These little kits come with a kind of a thing called a breadboard, and wires that you can just plug in. And we'll have already put a couple of wires on onto the sensor itself. So you'll be able to plug that straight into the breadboard. So I think it'd be really good. I think we'll be able to get up and running very, very, I'd hate to say easily, but it's going to be fun. It's going to be a fun thing to do, and you don't need lots of equipment around you to get started.
Excellent. Okay, great. Well, we are actually going to end early. We all love ending Zoom calls early. So thank you very much to everybody who attended today. Joán and Beth, thank you for your time as well. If anybody has any additional questions, feel free to get in touch with our team here. Our email is learn@ei.columbia.edu. If you have any questions about the offerings, about the rates, the times, the reduced rates, let us know, and we look forward to hearing from you, and we'll follow up and share a recording of this as well with everybody. So Joán and Beth, thank you, and Nick, thank you very much, and thanks to everybody who joined us. So we hope to see you in a future session. And with that, I will say bye. Have a good afternoon, everybody.